Welcome back to Chrono's Quality. So far, we have built a solid foundation. We understood that 5S must be managed as a project. We explored how agile thinking creates adaptive structure. And we defined the importance of kickoff, governance, and leadership alignment. But now, we arrive at the most critical point of all. Execution. Because no matter how good the strategy is, execution is where everything either works or breaks. Most organizations do not fail because they lack ideas. They fail because they cannot execute consistently. They start strong. There is energy. There is engagement. There is movement. But over time, something happens. Focus is lost. Priorities shift. Urgencies take over. And slowly, execution weakens. Until the system stops. Traditional execution models rely on long plans, large lists of actions, extended timelines, fixed expectations. But the longer the plan, the greater the distance between planning and reality. Because reality changes faster than plans. And when that gap increases, execution becomes disconnected. People no longer act based on current priorities. They act based on outdated plans. This is where the concept of the sprint becomes essential. A sprint is a short, defined cycle of execution. Not open-ended. Not indefinite. Structured. Focused. And time-bound. Because short cycles create urgency. They reduce complexity. And they force prioritization. The duration of the sprint is not random. 3 weeks creates a balance. Short enough to maintain focus. Long enough to generate meaningful results. If the cycle is too short, execution becomes superficial. If the cycle is too long, focus is lost. 3 weeks creates a natural rhythm. A cadence that sustains momentum. One of the biggest mistakes in execution is trying to do too much. Too many actions. Too many priorities. Too many parallel efforts. And as a result, nothing is done well. The sprint forces focus. It limits what can be done. And by limiting, it strengthens execution. Because focus is what transforms effort into results. At the beginning of each sprint, priorities are defined. Not based on intuition. Not based on urgency alone. But based on structured evaluation. What generates impact? What removes constraints? What creates visible progress? From this analysis, a small set of actions is selected. And only those actions become the focus of the sprint. This is one of the most powerful aspects of the system. Not everything that can be done should be done now. And this requires discipline. Because organizations are naturally driven by urgency. But urgency is not always aligned with impact. The sprint creates a protected space. A space where priorities are respected. And execution is not constantly interrupted. Execution happens daily. But control happens through structure. Instead of constant monitoring, the system relies on rhythm. Teams execute during the week. They focus on the defined actions. And at the end of the cycle, progress is reviewed. This creates balance between autonomy and control. One of the biggest advantages of the sprint model is visibility. Because work is broken into smaller cycles, progress becomes visible faster. This creates motivation. Because teams can see results. It also creates accountability. Because commitments are clear. And it creates learning. Because each cycle generates feedback. Every sprint is not just about execution. It is about learning. What worked? What did not work? What needs to be adjusted? This feedback loop is essential because it allows the system to evolve. Without this, execution becomes repetitive. With this, execution becomes intelligent. The sprint creates rhythm, and rhythm creates consistency. Every cycle follows the same logic. Define priorities, execute with focus, review results, adjust direction. This repetition builds discipline, and discipline builds sustainability. When organizations adopt this model, something shifts. Execution becomes intentional. Work becomes focused. Progress becomes consistent. And improvement stops being dependent on motivation. It becomes part of the system. There is also a psychological effect. Long plans create pressure. Short cycles create engagement. Because short cycles feel achievable, they create a sense of progress. They reduce resistance. And they increase participation. Without structure, execution depends on effort. With structure, execution becomes a system. And systems are sustainable because they do not depend on energy alone. They depend on design. Now that we understand how execution is structured, a new question emerges. How do we monitor this execution? How do we ensure that progress is tracked? And that decisions are made consistently? In the next video, we will explore the weekly meeting. The moment where execution, governance, and decision-making come together. Because at the end of the day, success is not about doing more. It is about doing the right things. With focus, with discipline, and with rhythm. And that is what the sprint makes possible. If you want to transform execution into a structured system, subscribe to the channel, activate notifications, and continue this series. And let me ask you something. In your organization, is execution driven by urgency? Or by structured prioritization? Share your thoughts in the comments.